Welcome, tennis fans, to the 35th edition of Changeover Chat in the Tennis One app. I'm Randy Master. If you don't recognize today's guest, you may want to rethink whether or not you are a tennis fan. Our guest serves as full-time on-site host of the Australian Open, Wimbledon, and the US Open on ESPN. She was an anchor of ESPN's flagship show, SportsCenter, for 20 years, while also covering the Winter X Games, FIFA World Cup, the Little League World Series, a bunch of other sports, and she even covered the Scripps National Spelling Bee, which, since being at ESPN, I know how big a deal that is. She's a native of Philadelphia and was a scholarship tennis player at Drexel University. Please welcome ESPN's Chris McKendry.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you on. I really appreciate it. So I want to go back to, I knew that you were a tennis player. I didn't know kind of the level of tennis player. Obviously, you were anybody that plays scholarship tennis at a Division I school is a good player. Can you take me back growing up in Philadelphia, where that all started and who got you into the sport of tennis?
Yes, I'm very proud of how it all started and what it stands for. In fact, I was introduced to tennis. My parents introduced me at a young age and just played, but I played every sport under the sun. In high school, I played soccer, basketball, swim team, and tennis. So I played a ton of sports. And I was in Bucks County when I first learned how to play tennis. And then when I was in 5th grade, my family, we moved back into Philadelphia proper, into the city. My mom really missed living in the city. And when I got into the city, lo and behold, there was the National Junior Tennis League at the playgrounds, the public parks, which we didn't have out in the suburbs. And tennis became a team sport. I tell Billie Jean King this all the time because it's her baby that tennis be a team sport and a co-ed sport. And that's what really turned me on to tennis, when it became a team sport, because I loved playing team sports. So I started playing with the National Junior Tennis League and kept improving, obviously, and played in high school. But kind of midway through high school, an opportunity opened for me to play all year round when the Arthur Ashe Center opened in Manayunk, a section of Philadelphia. It's now called Legacy Tennis. And it provided an indoor facility for a lot of kids who played in the city. I mean, as you can imagine, indoor facilities are hard to find. So that's when tennis became my sport that I really enjoyed and had an opportunity to play a lot and improve.
Your passion, I guess, started for sports broadcasting. Was that in college when you developed that passion?
For broadcasting, definitely. Not a passion for sports. I grew up in a very athletic family, a very sports-centric family, and I always followed professional sports and college sports, and so many sports. And my mom has a story. I was so young, and I went to an NCAA tournament game, which to this day it's. You listed all the things I've been so lucky to cover, and I would still love to be able to cover the NCAA tournament. But she said, I was like 4 years old or something, so young, and I came in and I was so fired up, having seen one of these NCAA basketball games at, the old Spectrum, I guess it was, in Philadelphia. Yeah. But Georgetown must have been playing, because I came walking in the door singing, "Let's go Hoyas," and then I would respond, "What the hell's a Hoya?" And she was like, "My gosh, my little child," So I always knew a ton about sports, and I never thought it could be a career for me. It's one of those. It's so important for young people to see it, to be it, and I believe that. And I'm so glad more women and kids of all different backgrounds and colors are starting to see. Sorry about my phone. And are starting to see more faces out there getting the opportunity, because I never saw a woman doing sports. But then when I got into college, I started an internship at the local newsroom at the Fox station in Philly. And anyway, that led to working in the sports department. And that's when I opened my eyes to, I think I can do this, for a living.
So when you started off in sports broadcasting, when you realized you could do it for a living, there weren't a whole lot of women, especially as sports anchors on
Right.
the evening news, on the 6 o'clock news. And I
No.
read that you were one of the first, at least in I think the DC area,
Mhm.
to kind of break through and
Yes.
be, really be a trailblazer per
Well,
se. And
yeah, yeah. You would see more women on a national network. But it was about that time that CBS had Leslie Visser, and I would see Andrea Joyce, and there was Jane Kennedy and Phyllis George. So Gail Gardner. You started seeing
yeah,
women on a national level, but still in local news. You're right. I mean, you usually had two men as the anchors, one during the week, one on the weekend. And if a sports department had a woman, she was your features reporter. She was
right,
your reporter. And, look, at the time, I would have been fine with that. I would have been fine just to have a job and get my foot started,
right,
foot in the door and work in the industry. But I was really fortunate when the ABC station in Washington, D.C., I was 4 years out of college with a little bit of experience on air, hired me to be a weekend anchor, to be the sports anchor. And it was the first time a woman was hired for that job in the market. And so many great ones have come through that market since and all over the place. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. So women have come a far way in a short time, I like to think.
sure, they absolutely have. And so you end up in Bristol, Connecticut, which is, as I know, and we both live in Connecticut, and I worked there. You obviously worked there you know, a longer
Forever.
time than I did. Um, but it is, it's considered the Mecca. It's a worldwide leader. You were there. Uh, did you start off at sport? I mean, did you start off Sports Center? That was your first job
Yeah,
when you got there?
that was my first job. I actually was hired to be a reporter based out of Washington, D.C., and I was brought up to Bristol for a couple of weeks in July of 1996 just to get a sense of how the operation worked and how the newsroom worked. And at the time, they didn't have a ton of anchors. It's not what it is today. It was before ESPN News. So they
Yeah.
didn't have a stable of anchors sitting there waiting to go on air. And they were actually down an anchor and asked me to anchor a show, a Saturday morning Sports Center. And I did. And the Olympic Park bomb had gone off that night. So in Atlanta, and I anchored the show that following morning solo. And they said, "Forget reporting. You're an anchor. You're staying put." And I never left SportsCenter for 20 years after that.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a great run. And I'd spoken to my friends now at Tennis Channel, Brett Haber and Steve
Yep.
Weissman, who were also anchors, and they brought me back to their first time anchoring Sports Center and kind of that day, and they remembered literally to the second
Yeah.
how they felt in that first show. Brett was he said he gave out like a primal roar when he got it just to let everything out when when he got on set. Steve was a little bit more reserved, but were there butterflies, or were you just so happy to be in that role and you were just psyched, let's get it going?
I think my experience was very surreal. I mean, one, I wasn't expected to anchor. I was
Right.
asked to fill in. To a bomb went off, so it was a huge news story.
Yeah.
I was by myself. I didn't have a co-anchor, and it was supposed to be 30 minutes of rip and read highlights from the night before, very scripted to absolutely no script. And it went an hour. And the producer, who was supposed to be my producer, actually, when I sat down, it was our big boss, Norby Williamson, sat down in the chair to produce the show instead of just a regular producer, and executives were in the back of the studio. I remember seeing John Walsh and Howard Katz in the back of the studio because of the news. I mean, it was
Yeah.
a huge story. So I didn't have time to scream, to do anything. I just remember sitting down thinking, this could be the shortest run on SportsCenter ever. Like I could be one and done. I have no
Right.
scripts in front of me. It's a national audience. A bomb went off. I was just, focused. I just kept telling myself, breathe and focus. And Chris Myers was the reporter on site in Atlanta. And I'll never forget. So we do this whole first segment, probably 15 minutes long, of telling me blow by blow what was going on down there, and everything, and me asking questions. And we hit the first commercial break, and we're still live to one another. He's still up and he can talk to me. And he goes, "Chris, who are you?" Like, I mean, people didn't even know I was hired yet. And there I was answering. So that was, I'll never forget that, because he has such a signature cadence. So for Chris Myers to say, "Who are you?" But yeah, so that was my first. And I don't know, I don't remember feeling, I was just nervous for the moment. I think, like most Americans, shocked by the moment, like,
Yeah.
this is really happening.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah. So you were part of that, but you also had to, deliver in what was a new forum for you. So
Right.
so you got through it. 20
Yeah,
years on Sports Center. I read that March
forever.
31st, 2016
Yes,
was your last Sports Center.
yes.
What was it like to say goodbye to Sports Center at that
Um,
time? Was it emotional for you?
what was really strange? I didn't think it was going to be. I was so excited to have my new tennis deal. It was
Yeah,
really the way I wanted to go, the direction I wanted to, ever since, I was first assigned to Australia in 2010. So I've
yeah,
been, I felt like I was really working my way toward this hosting position. And
yeah,
I was, when we did the deal, I was so excited for it. I didn't think about that. And Darren Cahill, my tennis, colleague, when I was going up there for my last show, I guess I spoke to him a day before, and he said, "Are you going to be emotional?" And I was like, "No, Darren, I'm so excited." He said, "You're going to be emotional." And I was like, "Well, I don't know." I hadn't stopped to think about it, because I was me myself was ready to move on.
yeah,
But then that last day, I realized how many people, I mean, because from signing my new deal to when it was the last day, it was only like a 10-day span. I mean, it all happened very quickly. Um, so when I realized how many people I would not really see again, because even though I'm with ESPN, I'm not in studio anymore. So, there were people I saw every day, and then a lot of good friends, and then I said goodbye. I actually wrote a piece to say goodbye, because I wanted to thank everybody. So I wrote a piece, and they rolled that, and I left. And then Jay Crawford, who was my co-anchor at the time, one of my favorite co-anchors and a very good friend, he came off the set and he just started crying. So then I started crying. And and then Teddy Bruschi's tearing up, and I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm honestly making Teddy cry. Like, this is crazy." But we have been a tight knit group, so yeah, I guess it was, pretty emotional. Um, and then it'll be strange, Actually, I'm going up to Bristol for a whole week next week, because we're doing the ATP World Tour Championship, from
yeah,
London, but we're
yeah.
doing it out of Connecticut this year for obvious reasons. So I will actually be in the Bristol studios for only the second time since 2016. So, you know,
Yeah. Well, I'm glad they're getting that in. That's going to be fun with,
yes,
the 8 top players right now. So
yeah,
everybody's looking forward to that, and the tournaments that are going on right now. At least they're out there playing.
right.
So as you talked about some of the talent that you work with in tennis, you
Uh-huh.
mentioned Darren Cahill. I mean, I watch as much tennis as anybody. I love the team that you have at ESPN. I mean, there's Chris Fowler and Chris Everett and the McEnroes, Pam Shriver, Darren, uh, Gilbert, Mary Jo. I could go on and
Right.
on and on.
Now James
Um,
too.
and James is back on. Renee. I don't know if I said Renee,
Yes.
but it's such a quality team. It seems like a very fun team. Now your position is different. Not different in terms of there are a lot of other people that do what you do across the sports landscape, but it's different. And I wanted to ask you if you felt like you were kind of a point guard out
Uh-huh.
there. Your
Absolutely.
your job is to kind of, as Dickie V would say, is kind of distribute the rock.
Yes.
You need to make them look good, and kind of lead the show and
Yes.
various segments. Um, with all of those different personalities, and there are a lot of personalities for
Big one.
sure. Is it difficult? Is it one big happy family that works together, or are there days that are tougher than other days?
Sure. I mean, there's always, I mean, it's a job. I mean, there's always
Right.
going to be harder days on the job than others. And some days are so easy and seamless. And then you have other days where you're like, I'm pulling information out of people. Come on,
Right.
So,
Right.
um, but I definitely am the point guard slash referee out there.
Right. Right.
And try to keep everything fair but it's a fabulous team. I mean, Jamie Reynolds is our executive producer of Grand Slam Tennis, and he's a great collector of personalities, and he meshes everybody really well together that you wouldn't necessarily see it at first, and then it comes together. But I think it's definitely my favorite crew that I've ever worked with, and I think that was part of the reason. Not just that I really enjoy tennis, and I find the international and the singular sport very interesting, and it's not all that. I mean, it really was my favorite group of people to go away with. I mean, and that's what's unusual about it too. I mean, people can work seasons together, and you see each other for 2 days, your prep meeting, your game, you call your game, and then everybody goes home to your family. Our group has to live together.
Yeah.
When we go away, we're away with each other sometimes upwards of 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
When we go down to Australia and come home, when we're at Wimbledon, I mean, a lot of us, we're in houses surrounding the village
Yeah.
and in the village, and we live together. I mean,
Yeah.
physically,
Yeah.
Chrissy and I are roommates in a house,
Right.
so you have to really get along. Like, there's no faking it. And I think that really comes through. I think
Yeah.
it's an interesting group because they've known each other for the most part since they were all really young. So that's an interesting chemistry level, that, I mean, Mary Jo's known Chrissy from the time Mary Jo was in grade school, and, they think about, she was on the tour. They were both on the tour for years together. So they've known each other forever, forever, and so that it's an easy chemistry with everyone, and yeah, I mean, they really do get along. Everybody's respectful of making sure somebody, like, often you can't see it on camera, but there's a lot of obviously communication. I do, be it eye contact or like nodding, so they know,
Yeah.
like, your turn, like, and so what I try to do is, like, and I think they trust me with that, like, you're going to get to speak. There's no reason to jump over top of that person, because there's I think there's nothing worse on television than three people talking at the same time. I know it's become quite popular, but it's
Yeah.
horrible, so that's what I really try to do. Like, I have their trust that you're going to get to speak, you're going to say your piece, but let this person talk. And then, I also have just a stare when I'm like, and get it back here. We got to go somewhere. Like, commercial. It's time to pay the
Yeah.
bills. Get me the ball. So kind of how it works.
uh, so just out of curiosity, like I see you and Chrissy out, on Twitter when you're at the slams and you're out having a good time. And Pam, who's the wildest of that bunch? Does everybody go? Let me ask you, does Mac go out and it seems like it's a fun bunch. I can't think of one of them that doesn't like to have a good time. But when you guys go out, you know,
Um,
is everybody kind of equal as far as you just have a great time together? Is there is Gilbert like hanging from the ceiling or
no,
anything?
I mean, this is also a group that they have a lot of fun, but everybody's really, really professional,
Yeah.
and it's a group that shows up to work. And so when it's time to work, I mean, nobody's going crazy. There's nobody swinging from the rafters in this um, not at all, not at all. And but it's an interesting, it is an interesting dynamic when you're out. One thing, and I say this about tennis players to other athletes, is there's only a few real team sport players that you could probably think of that honestly can't go anywhere in the world and not be recognized, right? I mean, think about it. If you're an American football player in the NFL, short of being, Tom Brady's level or someone like that, they can walk down a street in London, right? And they're fine. I mean, they're a popular American player. So, when you talk about Chrissy and John, there's really nowhere in the world they can go that they're not recognized, right? So
Yeah.
it's, I think everybody's pretty mindful of that. And same with the players. I mean, there's not a I don't think there's a corner of the earth where Roger Federer could walk just down a street and people aren't going to, give him a double take. So, I find that interesting with some of our personalities too, that when we're out, the bigger the personalities, they tend to be the quieter ones because they really just want to be quiet and be with the gang,
Right. So I want to get back to when you're on the set and that kind of traffic copping that goes on when you're the host of the show. So let's say you're getting ready for a big interview. So how much prep work goes in to getting ready for Roger? You've obviously all watched the match, so you have a perspective there.
Right.
But how much of it is orchestrated, and how much is very free flowing? Let's just see where Roger takes this. He wants to talk about his kids more than the match. We'll go with it. But take me through how that works, especially with a big star like Roger.
Right. Well, first of all, he is the best interview you can get. I mean, he is just terrific. It's like it's the way he is. When he commits to doing press or commits to a sit-down interview on the desk, no one does it better. He comes there and he is prepared. He's not just checking a box saying, okay, I did my ESPN appearance for the tournament or whatever it might be. He comes prepared. He comes with stories. There are times we always have a bank of monitors that, you can't see, but I can always keep my eye on. And, he might get interested in a match and we will have wrapped the interview and he'll sit there and say, can I just watch this tie break here? And he just, you just sit there. And so he's terrific. I always do, this is what I try to do. We did just watch the match. I'd like to hear some insight on the match if it's worth it. I mean, if he's coming by after a first round, 3-3-1, who cares, right? I mean, about the match necessarily, unless there's a great shot or, something. So I try to get more than what you can't get from the analysts or, you maybe can't get from the player. I love when they tell me more personal things. I think viewers just want to know these players better. I think it's important too now. We're trying to introduce a younger generation of players. I find Tsitsipas very, very interesting. Naomi Osaka is a superstar, and I love just watching her grow and continue to be herself. And be more willing and more open to talk. But I want the audience to know them. So I try to ask them more about what else are you up to? How did you spend your off season? Tell me about your fashion line you're working on. Those sorts of things. I always think it's very interesting. For example, I thought it was so interesting 2 US Opens ago to hear, or maybe it was Wimbledon's, I can't remember which one, doesn't matter, to sit down with Rafa Nadal had the best insight on Coco Gauff, and what it's like to be so young and so good, and what's important, how do you keep her grounded, what were you like at that age? And he told stories about how he would go out with his friends, he would do things, but he would come home earlier, or he would do that, or he was mindful of his tennis. But I've never heard him talk about what he was like as a teenager, so those are the things I try to bring out. But honestly, if I read an article or I hear an interesting quote from a tournament that maybe we're not covering, or if I'm watching Tennis Channel and I see something, I always have a notebook, even just here in the office. And if it's for a big player that I know I'll eventually see him at a slam, I ask him about it, and that's actually this year, incredibly sadly, 2 days before Kobe Bryant passed away, I asked Novak Djokovic in Australia, what does he talk about when he talks to Kobe Bryant and when he talks to, Cristiano Ronaldo? But I jotted that question down because last year at the US Open, Kobe Bryant joined us on set. And he was there, he started taking up tennis, and he joined us on the set, John McEnroe, myself, and Kobe. And I asked Kobe, was he Roger, Rafa, Novak? Like, which camp do you fall into? Everybody has their guy. and he said, Novak is my guy. And I was, Novak, and he talked about how Roger had sent him a racket, and Paul Gasol wanted him to like Rafa, because that was his buddy. And he talked about all the influences he had, but that he and Novak spoke a lot, and he tried to mentor Novak. And they talked through injuries sometimes. And as soon as that Kobe interview was done, I opened up my notebook page to Novak's page, and I wrote down, ask him about Kobe Bryant, and what's their relationship. So that's kind of how I'm constantly doing prep. That's my answer.
No, that's great, because even the diehard tennis fans aren't always interested in the X's and O's, and that, when you can go into a player's history and really kind of dig out more personal stuff about them, I think it makes it so interesting, and you all do a great job of that, for sure.
Yeah, and I leave the X's and O's. That's for our analysts. I do think it's very interesting, and you'll get more interesting. If Darren is asking, or Chrissy is asking about X's and O's to the player, they're going to get much more. The player is going to go really in depth and get so much more. Or I was really like the saber. When Roger would pull out the saber, I always found it so interesting, and I always wanted to know, like, what's the opponent? Like, is the opponent getting annoyed or what? I can't ask him that, right? But John McEnroe sits down and he goes, come on, you're toying with people, and he can say that to Roger. And they actually had a really funny exchange, and he got something out of him. But then he started talking about his shots as weapons, and that was a far more X's and O's conversation between the two of them. And I just sat in the middle like a fly on the wall, and I was fascinated.
Right. Well, before I let you go, I wanted to discuss what might not be a fun topic for you to discuss. I'm kidding. I'm not setting this up I'm setting this up in a funny way. Are you? I'm assuming you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I won't tell you who I like. I like one of the teams in that division, but it's not going to be hard to figure out.
Tell me, Dow.
They're at so the Eagles are at 3-4-1 and are comfortably at the top of the worst division, at least this year in the history of football, which is the NFC East.
Yeah.
They are
the worst in history, not just this year, like in history.
Right. So all these other teams are still in it somehow. The Dallas Cowboys at 2-7, the Giants at 2-7, the football team at 2-6. Where do you see that? I mean, you come from NFC East territory. Where do you see this one falling out?
Oh my gosh. I do think the Eagles are going to win the division. I really do. I think as predicted. If the Cowboys somehow, that would be amazing. I mean, right? They're on like their fourth quarterback in 5 weeks or something crazy.
Yeah, I didn't even know the kid they put out there yesterday.
No, I saw he was in another league, and he was like a Mr. Texas footballer or something. I don't know. But anyway, so I do think the Eagles will pull this out. It's ugly, ugly, ugly. but nobody's going to remember that, and you never know. I mean, you never know. But yeah, it is. Yeah. It's unbelievable to watch. I mean, it's just really bad.
Yeah,
but
well,
for you. I mean, a few years ago, the NFC East was killer. I mean, and now this is where we are.
Yeah. So, well, good luck to your Eagles. I'm actually a Giants fan, so we got a win yesterday.
Oh.
Over the football team.
Yeah. I have a question. So yesterday, I watched Red Zone a lot. I'm a big Red Zone fan.
Oh yeah.
But, anyway, at one point, Jones threw the ball away. And whoever was calling that game, the analyst said, that was one of the best decisions he's made all day. And I mean, like, to throw it away, right? I mean,
wait.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well, I think I do. So Jones took a sack, and he held on to the ball.
Oh, no, that's what you're talking about. Right. Yeah. He did it because he held on to the ball. He didn't held on to the ball. And that's what I was looking. I'm like, that's one of the best things he's done all day is take a sack and not fumble.
Right.
So I asked my husband this, and it was kind of a rhetorical question because he's not a Giants fan either. Do you wish you still had Eli Manning? I said, how many Giant fans are like, where the heck is Eli Manning? Wouldn't you still rather have him now?
Yeah. Well, no, I definitely would. I mean, Jones, he's shown signs of kind of being able to step into that, quarterback role. For the Giants, he turns the ball over all the time, which led that announcer to say, I think it was Kenny Albert, to say, or whoever the analyst was, but to say, unbelievable play. Just the best play of the game by far. He held on to a fumble when he got sacked. That kind of sums up the Giants. It sums up the Jets. The Jets are playing tonight. Not to get too into football, but that's actually the ESPN game tonight.
Your audience could not care about this conversation right now. And in fact, I've now turned the tables and I'm interviewing you. But I was so curious. I'm like, gosh, these Giant fans. I think Jones is headed for a career as a backup.
Well, Chris, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on. And maybe we will see each other in the area sometime.
Yeah, definitely scream if you're walking through the streets somewhere, and tune in, next week for the London, Connecticut-based London Championships.
Oh yeah, no, that's going to be a lot of fun. All right.
Thanks, Randy.
Well, thanks again. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye.